Hello, it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you all to our latest Google Hangout conducted by the National Cancer Institute, also referred to as the NCI. I'm Andrea Denicoff, Head of Clinical Trials Operations of the NCI's National Clinical Trials Network, or NCTN. I'm an oncology nurse practitioner with over 25 years of experience in cancer clinical trials. I'm truly passionate about my work to help make cancer clinical trials successful to ultimately improve the lives of people with and affected by cancer. Today's Google Hangout will be the NCTN, or National Clinical Trials Network, Progress and Lessons Learned. And we will talk about the latest information related to exciting new precision medicine clinical trials, including the NCI-MATCH, NCI-Pediatric MATCH, and we'll briefly discuss LungMap and the Alchemist studies. I'm pleased to serve as the moderator for what promised to be a fascinating conversation with my colleagues, NCI's Dr. Jeff Abrams, Acting Director of Clinical Research in the Division of Cancer Treatment and Diagnosis, and he's also the Associate Director of the Cancer Therapy Evaluation Program. Dr. Nita Seibel, Head of Pediatric Solid Tumor Therapeutics, and she's in the Clinical Investigations branch at the NCI. If you'd like to learn more about our backgrounds, please visit the NCI's website, www.cancer.gov. We have a lot to cover today, so I'll just briefly remind you that we would like to make this Google Hangout a conversation. So please feel free to ask Dr. Abrams and Dr. Seibel a question via Twitter. Simply post a tweet using the hashtag AskNCI, and we'll do our best to address it. Please note that with the limited amount of time we have today, we'll be focusing on the NCTN, today's topic. So like all of our social media events at the NCI, future Google Hangouts and Twitter chats may be about different topics, so other topics that you are more interested in could be addressed at that time, but we'll focus on the NCTN today. So we'll start with having our two experts introduce themselves. Dr. Abrams?
Hello, I'm Jeff Abrams, and I have been at the NCI now for over 20 years. I'm a medical oncologist and head, as Andrea just said, the Cancer Therapy Evaluation Program, better known as CTEP. And this program coordinates, reviews, and funds a large number of clinical trials across the United States and even internationally. It does this with a staff that includes physicians, scientists, pharmacists, nurses, and regulatory specialists, so that we can actually help the investigators around the country to conduct these trials in an efficient way. The precision medicine trials that we're going to talk about today are some of our most exciting new ventures into clinical trials, and I think they are showing the way forward for oncology. In the past, these trials, these sort of precision medicine trials, were conducted mostly at the large major cancer centers in the United States. And through our networks around the country, we're now able to bring these trials to community sites and to smaller centers so that it's available to more patients. We work closely in our mission with patient advocates and with clinical investigators around the country to do these trials. We also have partnerships with major pharmaceutical companies and with our sister agencies like the FDA, who regulates new therapies, new drug therapies in the United States. CTEP's mission is eventually to get new drugs approved for patients, and that's the ultimate goal of our clinical trials. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Seibel?
Hi, I'm Nita Seibel. I'm a pediatric oncologist, and prior to joining CTEP 7 years ago, I was a clinical investigator at Children's National Medical Center and involved in the Children's Oncology Group. And in addition to my interest particularly in pediatric solid tumor therapeutics, I'm also interested in adolescent and young adult oncology, as well as survivorship in issues with childhood cancer survivors. So I'm very excited about this opportunity to discuss with you the endeavors that are ongoing here at the NCI for pediatric oncology and precision medicine, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Great, thank you. So we'll start off with you, Dr. Abrams. President Obama has discussed the importance of precision medicine and that more research is needed into molecularly targeted therapies. What studies are the National Cancer Institute currently conducting in both adults and children?
There are 3 trials, Andrea, that are our lead precision medicine trials, sort of leading the wave of this new sort of clinical trial approach. They are LungMap, Alchemist, and NCI-MATCH. Now, LungMap, which if you're trying to look this up on the web, goes by the number S1400, and Alchemist, which is a series of trials, but you can find it by looking under A151216. Both of these trials involve patients with the most common form of lung cancer called non-small cell lung cancer. LungMap is trying to discover new agents that target relatively uncommon genetic changes found in some patients with advanced squamous cell lung cancer, which is a specific subset of this non-small cell lung cancer. For those patients whose tumors don't have one of the genetic changes, there is the chance to receive an immunotherapy treatment also in this trial. Alchemist, on the other hand, is a series of trials that take patients at an earlier stage in their lung cancer, just after surgery. These patients have their tumor tested for 2 genetic changes, EGFR and ALK, and if they have these genes, they are offered therapy following surgery with either an EGFR or ALK-targeted drug. Now, these drugs have been shown to improve survival for patients with metastatic or advanced cancer who have these particular mutations. And this study, Alchemist, will determine if giving the drugs earlier can prolong survival for patients with this earlier stage of disease. NCI-MATCH, the 3rd trial, goes by the number EAY131, and it's a trial for adult patients with many different types of cancer who have not responded to standard therapy. Patients undergo a tumor biopsy and have their tumor sequenced for genetic alterations. This trial includes a large number of treatments in which known molecular alterations are paired with a drug directed at the alteration. Patients whose tumors have the genetic change are enrolled on the drug paired with that change and are followed to determine the tumor's response. They remain on this drug as long as their tumor responds, and they even have a chance to receive a second drug in the trial if they stop responding to the first one, provided that their tumor has a second alteration for which there is a drug available in the trial. This trial opened in July 2015 with about 10 drugs matched to targets and rapidly enrolled over 800 patients. This pace of enrollment greatly exceeded expectations and required us to pause the trial, which was planned to assess the first 800 or so patients. While this assessment is ongoing currently, we hope to have results later this month to share broadly with the community.
Okay, great. That was really helpful. And Dr. Seibel, would you please tell us about the new pediatric MATCH trial that's about to happen later this year?
Sure, Andrea. So we're very excited about the NCI-Pediatric MATCH trial, which will be similar to what Dr. Abrams described for the adult MATCH trial, in that it will use the same platform for analysis of the tumor specimen, and it will be a national trial that is being done in collaboration with the Children's Oncology Group. For those patients whose tumor did not respond to frontline therapy between the ages of 1 to 21 years of age will be eligible to enroll on the pediatric MATCH trial. The number of tumors that we expect to screen will be somewhere between 200 to 300 tumors per year, And since pediatric tumors are different, as we know, we see different types of cancers in children as compared to adults, we also know that the number of mutations that are seen in pediatric tumors differs and is lower than the number of mutations that are seen in tumors that occur in adults. So we expect that there'll be a lower number matches, or where we identify the mutation, that there will be a targeted agent that can be used. We anticipate that 20 patients per treatment arm will be enrolled on this study, and we expect to have, on adult match, there's over 10 treatment arms, and this will be expanding, as you'll hear about more later on. We will probably have between 5 to 10 arms with pediatric match. Once the analysis is done on the tumor specimen, then the patient's doctor will receive a report of the genes that the tumor was tested for and the results of those testing, and if there were any mutations detected, and if there was a match with any of the treatment arms. If there is a match identified, then the patient and the family, depending on the age of the patient, will be offered the opportunity to enroll on that treatment arm. We hope to have pediatric match opened somewhere between mid to late 2016.
Great. Thank you for giving us the most recent updates on that. So, Dr. Abrams, the NCI created our new National Clinical Trials Network, or the NCTN, to conduct large trials across the country. And what makes it suitable now for these precision medicine trials? Why this network?
So this NCTN, or National Clinical Trials Network, Andrea, consists of 5 major U.S. groups and 1 Canadian affiliated group. And as you heard from Dr. Seibel, one group is focused on childhood and adolescent cancers. That's the Children's Oncology Group, or COG, while all the others focus on adults. Each group's membership consists of hundreds of sites around the U.S. and Canada that have proven themselves capable as high-quality investigators who can do complex cancer clinical trials. In addition, I should mention that there are sites actually that join these groups all over the world in many different countries, although those numbers are smaller. These different groups and their member sites band together to conduct trials that are proposed by one or more of the groups, but then the trial, once it's approved, is made available to sites at all the groups so that they work together to complete the trial quickly. So a single trial could really be made available to patients at 1,000 or more sites. That includes both small private practices and major university centers, and that include both rural communities as well as inner cities. The new era of precision medicine and oncology requires that we find patients whose tumors have the right target for the therapy that is being offered. This means that we have to often screen a lot of patients to find those tumors most likely to benefit from a targeted therapy. The National Clinical Trials Network has this capability and is primed to conduct these sort of trials. Now, all the network trials are conducted via a single centralized institutional review board, which is the ethics review that needs to be done for any sort of human research. And this reduces the regulatory burden on all these treatment sites, since they don't all have to review the trial. And they all use the same electronic data capture system to report research data, which makes it easier for all the staff. These features are pretty unique to NCI-sponsored trials and help to enable the conduct of the precision medicine trials that we've been discussing. That's why the network groups are the lead organizations for these 3 precision medicine trials that I've discussed. SWOG leads the LungMap trial, Alliance and ECOG-ACRIN lead the Alchemist trials, and ECOG-ACRIN leads NCI-MATCH.
Thank you. And Dr. Seibel, do you want to mention the Children's Oncology Group part of the precision medicine trial?
Sure. and particularly how COG fits into the NCTN. COG consists of more than 200 children's hospitals, medical centers, academic centers that care for children with all types of cancer, and mainly in North America, but also includes sites in Australia as well as New Zealand and Switzerland. COG has played a pivotal role in transforming children's cancers from what was virtually considered 50 years ago to be incurable to now with a combined 5-year overall survival of 80%. More than 90% of children with cancer are treated at a COG site. And since COG is a member of the NCTN, they use the same data capture system that Dr. Abrams described, as well as the NCI-Pediatric Central IRB, which actually expedites and makes it much easier for the multiple COG sites to open up trials and make them available to children and adolescents. Also, researchers from COG and the NCI have been working for the past year on developing pediatric MATCH in order to make sure that precision medicine will be made available to children and adolescents with recurrent and relapsed cancer. Thank you.
Great, that was really helpful. And Dr. Abrams, I think a lot of people want to understand more about how precision medicine trials are different from what used to be sort of traditional or conventional clinical trials.
I think the biggest difference, Andrea, for precision medicine trials is that they require a very complete study of the patient's tumor before beginning therapy. With the tools for testing DNA sequences of tumors that have now become available, we are able to get a more complete picture of all the genetic changes in a patient's tumor than was ever possible before. While we are now focusing on changes in the tumor's DNA, in the future we will likely include analyses of other parts of tumors, such as the proteins produced by these tumors and the immunologic makeup of the tumor and the patient. Based upon this improved understanding for each patient's tumor, we then try to match the drug therapy to the genetic changes. Formerly, all the patients with a given tumor type, such as lung or breast cancer, were treated in a similar way. However, now, with this precision approach, we base our treatments on the genetics of the tumor and not solely on the tumor type. In a single study, we can have drugs that target different types of genetic changes, which is more efficient than running a single trial for each genetic change. This allows us to discover new treatments more rapidly and also offers patients more options. I think those are the major changes. It takes more organization to run a precision medicine trial because you have to do a lot of screening of the tumors, and the logistics of getting those tumors to the laboratory and then back to the doctor treating the patient is more complex, and that's what we're putting a lot of time and effort into.
Thanks, that was very helpful. Dr. Seibel, did you want to add to that?
No, except only to say that the same principles that Dr. Abrams mentioned apply to pediatric oncology as well, and that we're fully aware that we will need to screen quite a few tumors to be able to identify targets that hopefully will then be matched with agents.
Okay, well that's really helpful because I think parents will really want to understand about the pediatric match and whether all children will need to have a biopsy of their tumor in order to be enrolled in that.
Andrea, that's an excellent question, and to be able to participate in the NCI Pediatric Match, the child or adolescent will need to have a biopsy of their tumor once it has progressed or recurred. And what is happening oftentimes in pediatric oncology, that this is done as a routine procedure, and if this is the case, they will be able to use that biopsy even if it's occurred several months prior to enrolling on the study. And this is obviously because we don't want a child to have to go through another biopsy if not absolutely medically necessary. The reason why it's important to have a biopsy and why we can't use the biopsy from the time of diagnosis is that we found from research that's been done, particularly in neuroblastoma, and we'll have more data on this through Pediatric MATCH, that there is a difference in the mutations that are seen from the time of diagnosis to relapse. There are actually more mutations that are present at the time of relapse. So it really makes sense if we're trying to maximize the opportunity to identify a target, we want to use it from the specimen that's most likely to have that abnormality or mutation.
Okay, that's very helpful. And I think families will also want to know that, so that once you're enrolled into Pediatric MATCH, does that mean that the doctors will search until they find a targeted treatment to match their tumor, and then get that treatment? And then if they can't find any matches, or a match treatment might not work, then what will happen next?
Well, that's true. Once a patient is enrolled into Pediatric MATCH, the tumor will undergo analysis looking at over 4,000 mutations that include over 140 different genes. But with that said, unfortunately, there will be some patients who will not have a target or a match that has an agent that can be used to target that mutation. So let's look at the different scenarios. So if they have a match, then they'll be offered the opportunity to go on that arm of Pediatric MATCH, and they can stay on it, as Dr. Abrams said, on treatment until if the tumor would become resistant to treatment and start to grow again. In that case, if by chance when they did the original analysis of the tumor, if they identified another mutation there, that we had an agent that could target that mutation, that patient could go on to that therapeutic arm as well. Now, in the unfortunate situation where the patient's tumor didn't have a mutation or something that could be targeted with a drug that was available, then we would work with the patient's oncologist to identify other trials and other treatments that could be useful, for example, through the Children's Oncology Group Phase 1 Consortium. So we could find other treatments for the patient's tumor, even if they didn't have a targetable mutation.
Great, I think that's really helpful. And Dr. Abrams, will the same sort of paradigm apply to adults on MATCH if there's not a match, and what are their next steps?
Yes, we fully intend to be able to direct patients to other clinical trial opportunities that may be helpful to them if they don't find a match. We have a large number of immunotherapy trials that are ongoing, which may be appropriate for some patients. And we have other new drugs that are undergoing development that don't require a genetic change. And we will try our best to direct patients to these other options should they not find a match on the NCI trial.
Okay, that's very helpful. So, and in addition, if some of these matching treatments really show positive results with many tumors shrinking, and that'll be very exciting, how rapidly will the next steps occur so they might help more people? What are those key next steps that will happen to those studies?
Well, that's a really important question, because what we hope that MATCH, NCI-MATCH, and Pediatric MATCH will be exciting trials to find initial signals of activity of these drugs that target specific molecular changes. And if we do find these changes, it will depend if they're discovered broadly across all tumor types, or if they are confined to a single or one or two tumor types. If it's the latter, we would expand the trial in those one or two tumor types to really get an idea of more precisely of the level of activity, and then begin even larger trials separately from NCI-MATCH or Pediatric MATCH to test them compared to standard therapies. So we would basically use these early trials to lead to more definitive trials that would really test their value compared to the current standard.
Thanks. That's really helpful. And I think I hope others watching this are excited about the precision medicine trials as I am, and I think it's very exciting that these trials will have new drugs added on as new agents come, finding matches. Well, how will everyone know? How will people be made aware of when these new drugs are added to either MATCH or pediatric MATCH?
Well, you know, we do have a website at NCI for these trials, and we do announce that the amendments to the trials, the changes to the trials as new arms are added. All the physicians who participate, of course, have the full protocol and are aware of all the genetic alterations for both trials that we are testing for. And we will allow patients who have been tested for in NCI-MATCH to go on the MATCH trial if a alteration is found for their tumor, as long as the other treatments that they've received in the interim have not caused them to respond. Of course, if they've had a response, then we might need to test their tumor again to be certain that the genetic makeup hasn't changed, and that is sort of the purpose, as Dr. Seibel said earlier, trying to understand what happens to these tumors as they're subjected to different therapies. So we are very hopeful that this platform will offer patients the option to go on the trial more than once should they have more than one genetic alteration, or if we add new arms and find different treatments later in time, they could go back on the trial at that point.
Thanks. I think that's really helpful to understand. And we're just about to add some questions from our Twitter feed, and I'd like to remind people that please use the hashtag AskNCI, and you can also use the 1-800-4-CANCER phone number to also call as well. So in addition, I wanted to just mention that in terms of finding sites of where the trials are, people can, as Dr. Abrams mentioned, use the NCI's website or NCI's Cancer Information Service at 1-800-4-CANCER to locate where any of these trials are. In addition, these trials are conducted within not only our NCTN, but our sister, I'll call it our sister network, the NCI's Community Oncology Research Program, or NCORE, that has, it's a community network across the country, and also has special sites in underserved and minority locations. As we know, it's key that we offer these trials to participate in people from all backgrounds, ethnic minority groups, as well as underserved and underrepresented. So we really want to have our precision medicine trials have diverse populations, and we're doing some key outreach to help make sure that happens. So it looks like we have some questions from Twitter. So we have one from a myeloma teacher. They want to understand if blood cancers are part of the MATCH trial. Dr. Abrams?
Yes, blood cancers are part of the NCI-MATCH trial. We do include lymphomas, which some people would include in blood cancers because the lymphocytes circulate, of course. But the multiple myeloma, another blood cancer, will be added to MATCH in the coming months. We have decided not to include leukemia in MATCH because we have other trials that are specific for leukemia that already are seeking genetic changes in the tumor, so we are keeping that particular blood cancer separate. But both myeloma and lymphoma are included in the adult MATCH trial.
And Dr.
I asked Dr. Seibel if she wanted to talk about pediatric MATCH.
Right.
Sure. Similar to what Dr. Abrams mentioned for adult MATCH, lymphomas are included in the NCI Pediatric MATCH trial, and leukemias will not be included, partly because they have already been doing sort of targeting with some of the agents that they're using right now and in some of the ongoing trials. So at this point, leukemias won't be included, but in the future, depending on some of the results, we'll just have to see.
Great, thank you. And Daniel Calvert gave us a tweet, wanted to know, with such large trials, is the NCI planning to use enrollment engagement technology, especially for parents? So I'll take the first part, Dr. Seibel. In terms of the NCI using enrollment and engagement technology, NCI's Office of Communication and Public Liaison has done a lot of work, such as setting up this Google Hangout, but has done a lot of work on social media about our large MATCH trial and some of our other precision medicine trials. And I think has had quite a large footprint about that. And I think the idea to use it for parents, for pediatric MATCH would be great. And I'll let Dr. Seibel comment more about that.
Well, just to follow up on that, already we have had some preliminary meetings about plans for communicating to the parents and to the pediatric oncology community about pediatric MATCH. So I'm sure we'll be utilizing some of these techniques. And based on the success that's been seen with adult MATCH in the involvement and enrollment so far, we're hopeful we'll see the same with pediatric MATCH.
Thanks. Another question from Women of Teal wants to understand which GYN cancer mutations, if any, are part of the adult MATCH trials.
There are mutations that can be found in some endometrial and ovarian cancers. These mutations span the gamut from what we call PI3 kinase mutations. There can be HER2 mutations. There can be other mutations in what we call the MAP kinase pathway. So that there are several mutations in common GYN cancers that are included in the MATCH trial, and for which patients with those tumor types, if they are no longer responding to standard treatment, would be candidates to participate in the MATCH trial.
Great, thanks. And thanks for people sending in your tweets, and please use the hashtag AskNCI, or you can also call 1-800-4-CANCER. So we have another tweet from Jennifer Widrum asking about NCI's precision medicine trials, and she understands that there have been a number of changes that are happening out there that will be affecting our trials. And could Dr. Abrams address some of those?
Sure. You know, for LungMap and Alchemist, the biggest changes in the trials are a result of exciting advances in immunotherapy. Several drugs called PD-1 inhibitors have recently been approved by the FDA for the treatment of advanced non-small cell lung cancer. And this has caused us to modify these two trials to take advantage of these successes. Both LungMap and Alchemist will include new study options that will provide treatment opportunities for patients whose tumors don't have the molecular alterations for which they are being screened. In LungMap, the study was recently amended to include an arm which compares the drug nivolumab, one of those newly approved PD-1 inhibitors, to the combination of nivolumab along with another immunotherapy treatment called ipilimumab. In the Alchemist study, a new amendment is expected early this new year that will allow patients who don't have the EGFR or ALK mutations to receive nivolumab. And this is one of the first trials to give this PD-1 inhibitor to patients with early stage disease. As I mentioned earlier, enrollment onto the NCI-MATCH trial greatly exceeded our expectations, and we are in this pause stage for the moment. Now, while the assessment is ongoing of the first 800 or so patients, we are using this downtime to increase the speed at which we can process the specimens coming into the trial and perform genetic sequencing. In addition, we are adding more targets and drugs to the trial to increase the chances that the genetic changes in a patient's tumor will indeed find a match drug in the trial, as the number of patients finding matches for their tumor to this point has been somewhat lower than we anticipated. We hope that those changes will really make the trial even more exciting, and we want to make sure that we have the capacity to do the genetic testing in the 2 to 3 weeks that we've promised patients when we set up the trial.
Thank you. And I just want to remind people that much of this information can also be found at www.cancer.gov on NCI's website, so you can go there for more information. We have another question about will any combination therapies be used on the MATCH trial?
Well, we already have a combination therapy on the MATCH trial, which combines drugs that target the BRAF and MEK pathway. Those targeted combinations prove their effectiveness in a cancer called melanoma, and now a skin cancer. Now we are looking to see if this same combination will be effective in patients who have genetic alterations of the type you find in melanoma, but will that apply as well to other cancers, which is really the fundamental question that we're asking in these MATCH studies. Of course, we're not looking for changes or responses in tumors that we already know the drugs work. We're looking for new indications for these drugs in tumors that have the same molecular alterations, but for which we don't know yet if the drug is actually effective. And so that's one combination. We would welcome other combinations, but that has been somewhat more difficult to find at present, although I'm hopeful in the future we will have more drug combinations as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. And we also have someone who's asking an issue that is there an issue about retention of patients in the MATCH study?
The patients so far, there has not been an issue about retention. The patients who did find a match seem to be doing fine with their study drug, and of course only time will tell if they respond. But patients the turnaround time has been pretty good. Where we get into trouble and what we're trying to improve is sometimes the specimens we receive are quite small, and it's taking time in the laboratory to tease out the tumor and do the DNA sequencing. In those few cases, it has taken sometimes more than 4 or 5 weeks, and there have been a few patients and their doctors who decided not to wait that amount of time before they went on to an alternative treatment. This really has to do with trying to get the best specimen we can so that we can run the sequencing without a lot of other manipulations of the tumor when they get to the lab. And those are all things during this downtime that we're working to improve.
Thank you. And Patty Spears sent us in a question. She wants to know if patient-reported outcomes will be considered in any of the arms for NCI-MATCH in the future.
The patient-reported outcomes, in other words, looking at toxicities and how the side effects of drugs are reported by patients, might very well be put into some of the MATCH arms once we have enough patients on the arm to know that we have a drug that actually has some responses. We are doing a lot of trials now that do have patient-reported outcomes in them, and we hope to have more in the future, but we should be able to actually do this within the MATCH trial as we have more matches coming up with certain drugs and be able to assess both the effectiveness of the drug as well as the side effects reported by the patient. So I'm hopeful that even in a very early trial like MATCH, we'll be able to get some patient-reported outcomes of side effects.
Great, thank you. And for Dr. Seibel, there's a question: how do you see precision medicine advancing pediatric trials, and what should parents keep in mind about these early precision medicine trials?
That's a good question, and you know, as Dr. Abrams mentioned earlier, that as he mentioned earlier, this is a screening. So this is a way in which we can get a pretty rapid idea if this drug is going to be active, particularly against the identified target. And once that happens, then we should be able to further develop it by looking at, depending on the types of tumors that responded, by looking at larger groups, seeing about combining it, and even adding it in at an earlier stage of standard treatment, or to do tests or design trials where we can really see the impact of that agent. So I think this should really help move things along. Now, one of the problems that we anticipate is that just the number of matches, knowing that the number of mutations that we see in pediatric tumors compared to the adult tumors is lower. So that'll be very important, and it will be something that we'll be monitoring throughout pediatric MATCH to see the number of matches that occur between identifying the target and then having a target, a specific agent to target it. One very positive aspect of pediatric MATCH is that in the past, sometimes there's been a delay in using new agents in pediatrics until they've gone through the formal pharmacokinetics and formal phase 1 study. For pediatric MATCH, as long as the dose has been identified for adults, we're working along with the pharmaceutical company for the agent as well as the FDA to identify the dose that would be safe for a pediatric patient, and we would monitor the patient very closely for any toxicity and do limited pharmacokinetics. So in a way, the pediatric and adolescent patients will have earlier access to a drug for an identified target in their tumor.
And I just wanted to chime in, Andrea, that that is one of the other advantages of these precision medicine approaches. We can actually try to get these new agents to patients sooner than they would otherwise have access, and that's why I stress that it's a big screening effort to find the patients, but it has the benefit of making drugs available much more quickly than we were able to in the past.
Great. I think that's really important to stress for everyone to understand that point. And we did get another question in about the 2 lung cancer precision medicine trials, LungMap and Alchemist. A writer wanted to understand what we've been able to find out so far after having these 2 trials open for about a year.
Well, what we found out, as I mentioned, we will have results of treating patients with immunotherapy. Our results will add to the literature that's known that these drugs are effective. And that's why we amended the trial, because we want to ask a question now of combination immunotherapy. In addition, it's been hard in the LungMap trial to find patients with these uncommon mutations. And so instead of having them randomized between a standard therapy, a chemotherapy, and the targeted therapy, we are now going to allow patients with the targeted, who have the molecular change, to receive, excuse me, to receive the targeted therapy alone, hopefully enroll them faster, and if we see signs of activity, then we would go on to randomized trials. So we're hoping to speed up the process by changing the trial in ways that should make it more attractive to patients and get us answers more quickly.
Okay, I think that's helpful. And we had another question from a previous submitter, the myeloma teacher, who's asked, says they looked up MATCH on clinicaltrials.gov, and it does show that, of course, you've mentioned the trial is on a pause or it's listed as suspended, and they would like to know when the NCI-MATCH might be reopened.
Well, we're hoping for the springtime. I can't give a precise date. We should have the more precise information later this month, but we're hoping for early spring would be the time that we're able to restart enrollment, and sometime shortly after that we hope to be able to include myeloma patients.
Thank you. And I just want to remind everyone that when it is reopened, we will do lots of broadcasting via multiple different channels through the NCI to help alert people that it will be reopened. And that for all of our precision medicine trials mentioned today, patients and families, interested public can look at the NCI website, www.cancer.gov, call our NCI's Cancer Information Service at 1-800-FOR-CANCER. And also, if you're under care with your doctor, most oncologists will be aware of this trial, and they can talk to you about it as well. I think we've covered a lot today, and I just would like to give Dr. Abrams and Dr. Seibel a time for any closing remarks prior to our ending our Google Hangout. Dr. Abrams?
Well, thanks. I've enjoyed talking about these studies with everybody. The precision medicine studies that Dr. Seibel and I discussed are really just the tip of the iceberg. There are many other smaller studies ongoing in NCI's treatment trial networks that specifically target molecular changes in rare and common cancers. These can be searched for on NCI's website, cancer.gov. Most of these trials are trying to detect a signal of activity using these new agents, and that's a prerequisite to starting a larger study for more standard therapies compared to these new targeted agents. Alone, or more often, the new agents can be added to the current standard. In addition, we're looking for markers in the blood or in the tumor that will guide us in selecting more precise approaches to targeted therapies and immunotherapy, so that these treatments can be added to or used instead of our current standard approaches. And I think that makes us all very optimistic as we go forward.
And Dr. Seibel?
I would just like to finish up by saying, in the beginning I mentioned about how the Children's Oncology Group has been instrumental in changing the outlook for children with cancer, children and adolescents with cancer, to overall survival as a group of 80%. Hopefully precision medicine will make a difference in pediatric oncology, because obviously 80% is not a number we're happy with. We want it to be 100%, and we look at this as one stepping stone to getting closer to that number.
Great. Well, I know everyone agrees with that we're all hopeful that all these promising precision medicine trials really bring help to those people living with and affected by cancer. So thank you both for joining us today. And thank you for everyone who's participated in the Google Hangout. And we look forward to future ones. Thank you.